discuss about the advances in the zooplankton research in the Indian waters. Here I will first brief a little about the plankton and then the works carried about on zooplankton in Indian waters, and finally what can be done in future. So actually the planktons are the small organisms in the aquatic ecosystems which have very feeble locomotive power. So they can't swim against current, and they can have a actually wide size range. Some of them are microscopic, some of them we can see in naked eye. So based on their functional role also, we can divide them in many ways. For example, some of them are autotrophic, which produce through the process of photosynthesis, which prepare their own food. For example, phytoplankton. Then there are zooplankton, which are heterotrophic, which take other plankton as their food. Also, there is mixotrophic, like some dinoflagellate, for example, green noctiluca, which can prepare their own food as well as it can take other phytoplankton or even microzooplankton as their food. Then there are also decomposers. Based on their life cycle also, we can divide them in holoplankton and mesoplankton. Some plankton spends their whole life in planktonic stage. For example, Copepoda, Ketonatha, etc. So they are called holoplankton, whereas some plankton spends only part of their life in a planktonic stage. For example, the fish larvae or decapod larvae. So later they become nekton. Now, in case of zooplankton, so actually they are the, as I told, heterotrophic organisms, and actually they are important link between the primary producers and higher trophic level, including the fishes. That is their main importance. So they also have a wide size range, and based on that, they can be classified into micro, meso, macro, etc. Generally, 20 to 200 micron size range, we call them micro. Then 20 to 200 to 200 micron to 20 millimeter, 2 millimeter, we call them meso, and larger than that is macro and mega. Here, in most of the cases, in my slides, I will keep my discussion related to this mesozooplankton. They are a major link in the pelagic food chain in case of both the classical and microbial food web. In case of classical food web, the phytoplanktons actually, through the process of photosynthesis, they prepare their food. After that, zooplankton takes them, and zooplankton get predated by higher trophic level organisms. But in case of microbial food web, it starts with the microbes, then microzooplankton, then mesozooplankton, and higher trophic levels. Then they also have important role in biological pump. Biological pump means the biological derived carbon sequestration from the atmosphere to deep ocean. So it can be both active or passive way. Active way, as most of the zooplankton are good diel vertical migrator. So in that way, they help in the biological pump, and obviously passive way through their excretion of fecal pellets, molting, and after their death, they go to deeper water, the sink to deeper water. Then they also have a role in biogeochemical cycling and nutrient regeneration, because they are taking the phytoplankton as their food, and after that, after their death, they are disintegrating. So in that way, they have important role in their biogeochemical cycling. They are also good in what is called ecological indicators for ecosystem health. For example, these organisms are generally sensitive to particular environment. So well oxygenated environment, some organism can survive well. Less oxygenated environment, some plankton can survive well. So in that way, they can be a good indicator. For example, Pleuramamma indica this copepod can survive in less oxygenated environment. Then they are also good indicator of climate changes. Climate changes, everyone knows that it is happening. So they are very sensitive to particular physicochemical variables. This climate change also, they are becoming a good indicator of this climate change. And fishery zone, both phytoplankton and zooplankton are actually important food of fish. So good abundance of phytoplankton also becomes a good indicator of good fishery zone. They are also tools in ecotoxicological studies due to their short lifespan, sensitivity, and robustness. I've just given some major mesozooplankton taxa photo here to get a brief idea. Like the first one, the Copepoda, that is the most common and dominant mesozooplankton in marine system. They are crustacean. They can be herbivore. They can be omnivore and carnivore also. Then second one, another ostracod, that is also another crustacean zooplankton. They can be herbivore, omnivore, even scavenger also, these ostracods. Third one is the crustacean Cladocera. Then fourth one is Lucifer. This down row, you can see chaetonaths. Chaetonaths are actually the dominant carnivorous zooplankton in marine ecosystem. They are actually in Indian water, around 30 species are available, and Sagitta inflata is the dominant chaetonath in upper 300-meter water. Then Hydrozoa, they are Cnidarian. So this gelatinous zooplankton has immense role on the ecosystem, because within short time, Hydrozoa can eliminate a huge number of prey. So that way they can change the ecosystem within a short period. Generally, if zooplankton is eaten by fishes, then that is good for the ecosystem. Whereas if it is eaten by the hydrozoa or jellyfish, in that case, actually hydrozoa is generally not taken by higher predator much. So that becomes bad for the fishery. Then salpa, it is actually a tunicate. They are filter feeders. And finally, the Copeleta, this is another chordate that they are actually filter feeders. We just see about brief about the initial periods of zooplankton research in Indian water. It started around 1899, 1900. We can just see here that the work they did on the Maldives and Lakshadweep archipelago. It was actually led by Stanley Gardiner. Now that based on the cruises, they actually gave the details of many organisms, planktonic organisms present in that environment. Later, Gardiner again led one more important expedition, that is Parsi Sladen Trust expedition, that 1905. So that is also in Arabian Sea. And finally, not finally, one more important is John Moore expedition, that is 1933-34, that is in Arabian Sea. So this way, some sporadic major expeditions were there, which helped to get about the what is called diversity and description of organisms present in limited area. When these expeditions are going on, sporadic expeditions, and that time actually there were also the Indian scientific community also did some regional scale information mostly in the coastal waters throughout the Indian coast. If you see this, I have kept only few just to give an idea about that period itself. There was idea about the marine fauna of Madras. Then this is in zooplankton in Bombay water. Observation of plankton of the Cochin backwater, marine plankton from waters around the Crusadai Island, then Malabar coast, Chilka Lake, Hooghly estuary, Lawson's Bay, Voltaire, Madras. So when means Indian scientific community actually started that time itself or to work on, but mostly it was limited to particular regions, not that commonly they were working in overall Indian Ocean. It was the mostly regional scale information from the coastal regions of Indian water. The major breakthrough came during the International Indian Ocean Expedition during 1959 to 1965, that period. It is actually true sense a major breakthrough, because during this expedition around the scientific community from 20 countries participated, and our total 40 ships are used for this sampling. Among that, 4 are Indian ships, that was INS Krishna, RV Varuna, MF Bhangra, and RV Kank. The advantage of this IIOE studies was that first time there was a very systematic sampling in the Indian Ocean. And as I told you earlier, that previously the studies were mostly some region, either in Maldives region or Arabian Sea, part of Arabian Sea, or the coastal waters. Here, for the first time, extensive coverage of Indian Ocean region was carried out. That's why when we see that what was the progression in information on zooplankton in the Indian Ocean, we can understand that pre-IIOE period, it was mostly the taxonomical information and diversity of limited zooplankton from limited region. So during IIOE period, first time we got a detail about the bathymetric distribution of zooplankton, their vertical distribution and abundance. And not only the vertical range, the samples were also collected from different depth layers. So along different depth layers, how they are distributed, how their abundance is distributed along the vertical layer, their sociography, and obviously detailed species-wise information of all major zooplankton taxa. Actually, still now, the zooplanktonologists like us, we feel that the IIOE data is the most best baseline data in our Indian Ocean region. After this IIOE period, actually, many studies have been carried out continuously, and it's carried out by different research organizations and by universities, etc. So just here I have mentioned about a few major programs which have an important role on the understanding of zooplankton ecology and distribution. For example, the one is Indian Joint Global Ocean Flux Study. It was during 1994 to 2000. Then Bay of Bengal Process Studies 2000 to 2006, and Marine Research on Living Research. This JOGOPS India and BOBPS, Bay of Bengal Process Study, here the what is called improvement in the understanding from IIU was that here first time we understood the processes, with the factors or the physical processes which leads to the variability in the zooplankton biomass abundance and distribution. Also the biogeochemistry of this zooplankton was understood based on the output of these studies. Then during the Marine Research on Living Resources, here actually the study region was both Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea and Andaman Sea, and it was restricted to the Indian EEZ, but the station locations were much more closer, and there was also diurnal location. So that's why we got a much more detailed output on the zooplankton abundance distribution and the factors that governs their abundance and distribution. Now we just got an idea about the sampling techniques of zooplankton along time scale. We know that zooplankton net is the most commonly used method. So that's why first I have shown that. So first left side, it is Indian Ocean standard net that was extensively used during IIOE study. Then there is multiple plankton net. The advantage of multiple plankton net is that here at a time we can collect samples from different depth layers. For example, it is this MPN net is a photo taken from Farvi Sagar Sampada. Here, 5 nets are attached together, so we can collect samples from 5 different depth layers. Then the WP2 net, that working party 2 net, which can be used both for vertical and horizontal sampling. And the right side there is the Bongo net. This this also can be used for both horizontal and vertical hauling, but in Farvi Sagar Sampada we generally use it for horizontal hauling. There are also many other standard nets which are used in Indian water in different time, like Calcophie net, then Mockness net, etc. Now, what are these advances in the zooplankton sampling? That actually there are some plankton that is called demersal zooplankton. That means they mostly stay near the bottom, and during night time sometimes they come up for getting their prey. So to get them, this plankton trap is used basically for this type of demersal zooplankton. Actually, it has been used in Indian water also in the lagoons of Lakshadweep. Then there is continuous sampling of for continuous sampling of zooplankton, the CPR, that is continuous plankton recorder, is used. Actually, Sir Alistair Hardy first designed it. So here this CPR can be used along the ship track. So continuously the water is collected, filtered, and actually it is collected in the with cloth. Then then there is the plankton pump. In case of plankton pump, we can collect water from any particular depth, and directly we actually get filtered, and we can collect the sample. And extreme right side I have given, that is CUFES, continuous underway fish egg sampler. This is specifically used for collecting the ichthyoplankton, the fish egg. It has three parts. That is the submersible pump, where the sample is collected around from 4-meter depth. Then there is a concentrator, where that is the sample is shaked vigorously, so that except fish egg, all other zooplanktons goes out. And finally a sample collector, where the fish eggs are collected. This has been recently added in Parvi Sagar Sampada, and we have found a good output from this. Now we can see the advancements in the zooplankton enumeration and taxonomic identification. So as we know, the traditional method like the microscope, actually the most reliable still now. So we have to use microscope for our taxonomic identification, but still there are many other new methods which we should use for the saving our time and labor. That is, for example, the automated image analysis. We can do it through FlowCam and ZooScan. Here, when you actually pass the samples through these instruments, they give you the image of the organisms as well as their size. So within a short time, you get the details of a huge number of samples. Obviously, from the what is called image, it's not always easy to identify the organism, specifically in case of species level, but still it gives a actually in case of at least group level, and it gives it helps a lot. Then there is for the DNA sequencing. All the zooplankton species, they have a particular type of gene sequence, and that's for why through the sequencing the gene also we can identify them. Actually, most of the cases what we do, we confirm the species, because some of the species it has a it changes drastically from its larval stage to the adult stage, or male and female there is too much differences. So sometimes it creates confusion about the whether it's same species or not. That time it helps a lot. Then the metagenomics, where overall the what is called the community, the genetic structure of the community itself is analyzed. Now coming to the advancement in the understanding of the factors regulating secondary production in the Indian Ocean. So first I am coming to the Arabian Sea, that what we have understood from during this period. Actually, we have found out that we have seen still now, based on the literature and the present studies, that different season in Arabian Sea, different season, there are different physical processes which helps in the higher production. For example, during summer, upwelling plays an important role in the higher production of zooplankton. During winter, the convective mixing due to intercooling in the, especially in the northern Arabian Sea, that helps in the mixing of the water column, resulting in the higher primary production. And finally, that leads to higher zooplankton during winter by this convective mixing due to this intercooling. And both intermonsoon, like fall intermonsoon and spring intermonsoon, the microbial loop plays an important role to support the higher zooplankton biomass and abundance. Except these major factors, there are also some other regulating factors. For example, the role of mesoscale eddies have been reported in Arabian Sea on the high zooplankton abundance and biomass. Recently, we have found that the regional scale process Lakshadweep Low play an important role to have higher zooplankton biomass abundance in the southeastern Arabian Sea, mostly the area in the Lakshadweep Sea region. The Lakshadweep Low is characterized by low sea surface height, it actually happens due to the Kelvin waves, annual and semi-annual Kelvin waves from the southeastern coast of India, and this actually influences the higher production from the monsoon to early fall winter monsoon period. Then cyclones, though the number of cyclones are limited in Arabian Sea compared to Bay of Bengal, but it has been found to have importance in higher zooplankton production in Arabian Sea. The ocean currents also play a role in the zooplankton biomass abundance as well as their community structure in Arabian Sea. Considering all these factors, one known term often used in case of Arabian Sea zooplankton is the Arabian Sea paradox. Arabian Sea paradox means that, as you have seen, that different season, different factors are influencing in zooplankton, what is called supporting the zooplankton production. So in Arabian Sea, it has been found the average zooplankton biomass along the season didn't vary much. That is in general called as Arabian Sea paradox. In case of Bay of Bengal, earlier it was generally considered that less productive compared to Arabian Sea. Although it gets a high amount of freshwater riverine input, but in spite of that, the primary production was considered to be less because it was thought that due to the strong stratification, as this freshwater is coming from the rivers, the strong stratification restricts the mixing of the water column. Then, although upwelling occurs in Bay of Bengal, but it is weaker than Arabian Sea. Except the cyclone period, the average speed of winds in Arabian Sea is less than Bay of Bengal. The wind speed in Bay of Bengal is less than Arabian Sea. That is also another factor. Then during monsoon, mostly it remains the cloud cover is there. So that also restricts the production and high turbidity. Although these are the factors earlier considered that limits the Bay of Bengal, it makes it very less productive. But later it have been found that there are other factors that actually helps to higher primary production, which in turn helps in higher secondary production. For example, Mesoscaledes, which occurs in Bay of Bengal throughout the year, because all the seasons now it has been reported to influence zooplankton production. Also, the upwelling, though it is not that strong like Arabian Sea, but still it also influences the production in Bay of Bengal. Cyclone is very common in Bay of Bengal, and the cyclone actually, the mixing of water helps in increase of the primary production, which in turn helps or supports the zooplankton. The river plume fronts, as so many rivers are draining their what is called freshwater into the Bay of Bengal. So this front means the interface between freshwater, the two different water mass. Here the front is between the freshwater and saline water. Here this zone have been found to be highly productive. So this way, actually this is good for not only zooplankton, for fishes also. The river plume front zones are highly productive. Now, based on all this, we can see the overall brief about what is the present knowledge we have now about zooplankton community of the Indian EEZ. That currently we have the idea about the physical processes that influences the zooplankton abundance and distribution in Indian water. Then the physicochemical variables that regulates the zooplankton distribution. We also have an idea about the behavioral aspects of zooplankton community, for example, vertical migration. As I showed you earlier, the diurnal stations during BOBPS and MRLR, etc. So from that, we have got an idea about the vertical migration of zooplankton community in this water. Then we have a better idea about the spatiotemporal variability of zooplankton abundance, distribution, and community structure. Because though zooplankton abundance may be same in the northern and southern part of Bay of Bengal or Arabian Sea, but the community will differ based on their preferred temperature, salinity, and other variables. The role of zooplankton on the biogeochemical process on the northern Indian Ocean, the information on this aspect also mostly known now. And currently the genetic structure, that means the DNA barcoding of many zooplankton species also have been carried out, that is giving that information actually day by day it is getting accumulated. The impact of climate change on the zooplankton community is this only in the preliminary stage. Though it is a very important issue, but currently we have studied that in case of Pitonata, there is actually we have found the change in the community structure as well as the poleward migration, but in other community the information is quite limited, so this remains as in a preliminary stage. On this scenario, now I am going on what can be the future thrust on zooplankton research in the Indian EEZ, because here first one can be the application of advanced technology in deciphering the taxonomy, diversity, and distribution of the zooplankton community. For example, as I told you earlier, the what is called those image using the image automated image or the metagenomic studies, that will help you to get you what is called information regarding the zooplankton community in a small time, in a much more bigger scale result. Then comprehensive evaluation on the impacts of climate variability. Climate variability, and now every one of us accept that climate is changing, and three factors here are quite important. One is that sea surface, surface temperature is increasing, and ocean acidification is also occurring. The ocean acidification means that the pH is actually ocean water pH is gradually decreasing. Still, it's not acidic, but its pH is decreasing. And third one is the expansion of oxygen minimum zone. Actually, northern Indian Ocean, it is one of the most oxygen deficient zone in the world. So here, this what is called height of the oxygen or the range, actually it is present in the mid-depth layer. So its range is day by day increasing slowly. So all these factors, what is the effect of all these factors on the zooplankton, their abundance, their distribution, and their what is called phenology. Phenology means, for example, some organisms, some plankton might have their main breeding period during September. So with increasing temperature, it may breed during October, because the temperature which was earlier in September, it has changed to October. So like this changes in the phenology, all those things we have to consider. And based on that, we have to, the main aim should be how it is actually influencing the biological pump and fishery potential. As I told that both phytoplankton and zooplankton, they are the very most common food of the fishes. So any changes is in the zooplankton abundance, distribution, and community structure will also influence the fishery potential. So that's why we have to consider all these matters for our future research. Then satellite-based estimation of zooplankton distribution for periodic monitoring. In case of many physical variables like SST, directly we can measure from the satellite sensor. So, however, in case of phytoplankton biomass also, using ocean color, we are directly estimating. But in case of zooplankton, we generally it is not directly estimated, but we get it by passive way using model by the phytoplankton and other physical variable. Recently, actually 2021, I got one paper that in North Atlantic Ocean, they have estimated the abundance and distribution of the copepod Gallonus finmarchicus using the ocean color data. So directly, so it is also possible. So it is actually improving in a faster way. So we have to consider the satellite-based data also for the zooplankton abundance and distribution monitoring. Then the stable isotope. Actually, stable isotope is becoming a very crucial tool for what is called because this organic carbon and nitrogen, that del C13 and del used very much for understanding the diet preferences and trophic status of zooplankton. But in Indian water, however, the study related to this is relatively less, and this can be used nicely for better understanding of the pelagic trophodynamics. And there are many other things which we can we should consider, but I just briefed among the major things what we should give a future thrust.